Faced with restoring a car that's as rusty as this Rancho, people sometimes tell me that when it comes to restoration, they wouldn't know where to start. I completely get that, but actually, for me, the hard part isn't knowing where to begin. It's knowing how to put it all back together again. In this video, I'm going to share with you the simple framework I use for working out the complex process of rustproofing and finishing and positioning and reassembling this complicated repair panel with its multi-skins and multiple things that need accurately locating and making sure that it's all rust-proof. At the same time, I'm going to show you 3 ways that I'm making this car better than it came out of the factory, because I'm going to make sure that the rustproofing is a lot better than Matra or Simca did, because I'm not doing this job again in 3 years' time. If you're regular here, then you might have seen in previous videos how I made all of this assembly out of sheet steel and swear words. And you might also have seen that in the last video, I said that it was almost finished. That proved naive. I've taken care to locate the hinges properly, but what I didn't do is locate this check strap, which kind of goes sort of there, but sort of isn't good enough because this bolts straight into the door, as do these hinges. So I'm going to have to make some sort of a template on the door. This template gives me the location of the bolt holes on the door for the hinges and for the check strap. So then I can transfer the template across to the actual hinges on the car, and then that'll give me the car side check strap position. This is the check strap separated from the rusty bit of metal that was behind it. So there's this plate and then a sort of hinge pin that goes through, and that's peened over at the end. There's not really anything wrong with the hinge pin or the hinge, except that it's been spot welded onto what is now a very rusty piece of steel that's double thickness. So I could separate that off, I could drill out the spot welds and then reuse this. But to be honest, by the time I've cleaned it up, I might as well cut it all apart and start again. I've got these, which are thick steel brackets, just from a B&Q or whatever hardware store. And if I've got 2 of them, if I cut those up, I can make a back piece and the two hinge pieces that come up. I've got this funky ruler that's very useful for this sort of job, where it's got a 0 in the middle. So you can line things up. If you want to find the middle of something, you can line things up so that they're an equal distance from the middle, and then just, there's your 0 point. It's very handy, that. Just tacked one of them in, and I've lined it up on a bolt so that it's nice and square. there it is after a bit of a clean up, a bit of a linish back and a spray with some weld-through primer to stop it going rusty while I'm waiting to fit it. For working out the reassembly sequence, there are 4 main components I need to worry about. There's the check strap mount I've just made, the hinges which need positioning carefully so the door will fit properly. Then there's the inner strengthening piece of the doorpost and the outer panel that mounts to various points around the outside of that as a double skin and finishes things off. And for these 4 things, I need to do each of 4 or 5 processes. So they need positioning in place so that everything fits together nicely, and they need holes drilled so that they can be plug welded and so on and so forth. They need priming and rust proofing both inside and out so that they don't rust again. They need welding in place to each other and to the car. And then the whole thing needs its final finishing for its top layer of protection. So that gives me a matrix of all the things I need to do and all the things I need to do them to. So then it just becomes like a giant game of Twister, where I need to work out how to hop from one square to the next without falling over or placing a body part somewhere I shouldn't. Is that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein in that picture? I think we should be told. Anyway. Maybe it's just how my brain works, but I found this framework really helpful in working out the correct sequence. And the sequence is critical because with all these multiple layers and multiple points of positioning that need to be correct, you really do have to get things in the right order. Otherwise, you'll find that you've lost access to something that you need to treat with epoxy, or things don't line up, or you can't get at the back of something that you need to weld in place. This took several iterations to get right, and even then I nearly made a big mistake, which I'll talk about in a minute. Obviously you don't need it for just an MOT patch or something, but where it's this complex, it really does help to think it through. The Rancho is based on the commercial chassis cab version of the Simca 1100, the VF2. And as with a lot of commercial vehicles in the factory, corrosion prevention wasn't top priority. If I look at this old original piece that I've just fished out of the scrap box, it's not even painted, it's just been powder coated, and that's by no means the worst. If I look at this, which is this bit, this is the outer, the rest of the outer is completely gone. This is the inner. See, it's just worn completely through. This is the inner part of the double skin, and it's just holes. So powder coating is just not going to cut it. Instead of doing that, I'm going to treat the bare metal with a layer of rust preventer. In this case, I'm using Bilt-Hamber Hydrate 80. This reacts with any oxidation that might have started inside where I've welded, and it coats that and the bare metal with a strong protective skin that forms a thick rust-proof base layer. It looks as though bits are quite bare, but we'll give it a second coat shortly, after about 20 to 30 minutes it says, at 90 degrees, so brush the other way. Dinitrol RC900 and POR 15's rust preventive coating do a similar job to this in slightly different ways. You can see in the light here that nice sheen sort of epoxy coating to keep it nice and rust free. The second part of making the car better than factory new is about metal shaping. But before I get to that, I've got some more basic metal shaping to worry about first. Where these fit together, I want to go a little bit tighter for spot welding, just here, where it's sort of in contact there, but maybe you have a couple more contact points a bit further along there. And at this end, here, it's in contact up towards the edge, but sort of down towards there. It'd be good to bend this panel that way a bit so that it fits up closer against the outer one. I'm not too worried about this side because it will be spot welded where the hinges go at these flat indentation points. I'll do. There are a lot of holes for spot welds to be drilled into these pieces of metal. I did count them, but I've since forgotten how many it was. I think it was about 50 odd. something like that. All of them need cleaning back with the finger sander as well, so that the rust-proof coatings don't contaminate the welds. So another way I'm going to make this better than the original is I'm going to put a little drainage channel in here, just a tiny one, because this is the bottom of the box section here, and it's possible for moisture to get in and run down inside, which is what causes all the problems, and I want somewhere for it to come out. I might do one in each corner. These holes won't affect the structure because the panel is just spot welded in a couple of places anyway. And they should be small enough that they don't let moisture in from below while letting it out if it does get into the box section from above. So from a distance this looks nice and smooth and great, if a little bit scratched up, but if you look closely it's full of tool marks and yeah, a little bit rough. So, and some of it will be visible, so I'll see all this roughness every time I get in the car and it will pain me. So we're gonna give that a bit of a skimmer filler just to neaten that up. The first thing I've got to do is clean off all this weld-through primer, which has stopped it flash rusting, but isn't a good base for filler or primer to stick to for the final finish. So that's all got to come off. I'm doing a first coat with some general purpose P38 body filler, just to fill any bigger irregularities. Then for a second coat I move on to the finer stuff that leaves a smoother finish, and for that I'm using U-Pole Dolphin glaze. And a hotel room key, because I'm classy like that. And it's at this stage that I've just realised, with everything fitted up here, ready for final welding and painting, that I'm about to make a potentially terrible mistake. You see, my plan with these hinges was to weld them through from the back because it's easier to do. You get a much better contact area and a stronger weld, I think. But if I do that, then if there is any final adjustment needed to make the door fit and do door things as it should, then I'm going to be completely screwed, because there's no way, the only way I'd be able to drill the hinges out and adjust them at all would be to, well, just to take the whole thing apart. And I'm not going to do that. So I think what I'm going to do is what they did at the factory, which is I've lined everything up so I know this is in the right place. But I'm going to do the final welding on of these hinges through these holes, which kind of doesn't seem like a lot of spot welding, but it'll be enough. And as long as I get plenty of energy in there for good penetration. And then what I can do actually is I can do that final welding on with the door in place, I think, because the door comes to about here. I should be able to get behind it, at least enough to tack it in place to tack the hinges on, and then take the door off again and do the final welding up. I've made this brace. I still need this because I've got to make sure that this is in the right place as a basis for welding these two. So that wasn't a waste of time. But I'm not going to rely on it 100% for the exact fit of the door. The door check strap mount does need to weld through from the back, but that's okay because there's a bit more give in that. These hinges have got no give whatsoever. This side is welded on, this side bolts onto the door, but into captive nuts that don't have any adjustment on them. You could shim it slightly, but only in one direction, and it's just... yeah, there's just too much at stake. I'll need to take this bracing strut out before I can fit the door, but that isn't going to happen anytime soon because there are issues with the structural integrity of the upper part of the door frame, but there'll be lots more on that in the next video. The first MIG job is to weld up these now redundant plug weld holes where I'm not going to secure the hinges. Piece of thick copper. And then linish them back smooth so that the hinges do fit snugly. Not flawless, but it's good enough. Then my complicated magic list tells me that I need to fit that check strap hinge mount after I've cleaned back the rustproofing from the points I need to weld to. I'll just tack it in first to check the alignment and then fill up those handy pre-drilled holes with plug welds. Reasonably effective welds filling those holes and reasonable penetration through to the other side. And with that done, I can also chop off the excess length of the hinge mounts and then neatly round those off. Lovely. After a quick wash and blow dry, we're ready for the third way I'm making this more rust-proof than Simca did, which is to use better paint. This is 1 part epoxy primer. Most epoxy primer is 2 part, but the trouble with that is that you waste what you don't use because it hardens in the can once you've broken the seal. With this, I can work in stages as I need to. Some people will tell you that 1K isn't as good as 2K, and they may have a point. But it seems pretty tough to me, and I've seen professionals use it, and anyway, I'm planning a 4th improvement on the factory rust treatment before this goes back on the road, which will be a good dose of cavity wax. But I'll do that after I've finished all the welding, because I don't want it all to catch fire. There is one more rust prevention measure that I've still got to do, and that's to put seam sealer over all my welds. I'm not claiming this as an improvement over factory, mostly because they didn't have a patchwork of welds like this, and they did use seam sealer in places where it was needed. And with that finally done, and the epoxy scraped back where the plug welds are going to go, I no longer need access to the gap between the panels, and so I can start to weld things together. Where I do have access, I can also just clean up the welds with a little wire brush on a Dremel and give them a recoat of epoxy. It's now time for one last trial fit, and that throws up a whole multitude of tiny little adjustments that need to be made, and one not so tiny adjustment because at the top here it's not quite the right shape. It's not very straight, so we want that straighter. Quite a bit straighter, it's nearly there. Do. Look at me doing Hollywood welds, sort of. It's almost a shame to linish those back. I'm going to anyway. And there it is fitted. It's only tacked on for now in case I need to take it off to make any final adjustments when I fit other bits of metal to the top or the bottom. but it's in its final place and just needs masking and giving that final coat of epoxy on the outside to preserve it and make it ready for paint somewhere down the line when I've done the rest of the car. But more on that story next time.